Let's talk a little bit more about how the federal governments around the world regulate and monitor vaccine safety. The latest case was from 1998. Rotavirus infection is a potentially fatal disease in children, and the development of the RotaShield vaccine in 1998 was quite exciting for the fact that it would protect against this deadly disease. However, 1 year after RotaShield was given as a vaccine, it was withdrawn because it was discovered that in about 23 infants, 1 to 2 weeks after vaccination, out of millions of doses that were given in that year, there was an occurrence of intussuspension, which is twisting and obstruction of the bowel. That RotaShield vaccine was no longer and never used again. Subsequent to that, though, 2 RotaShield vaccines are currently in use for infants in the United States. RotaTeq, which was approved in 2006, and RotaRix, which was approved in 2008. Now, the reason why RotaShield was approved is because in the clinical trials that had occurred prior to its release, it was not identified that this twisting and obstruction of the bowel could occur. And that's because it ended up only occurring in 23 infants out of millions of infants that received it that year. But we now know, after clinical trials and subsequent year after year use, that RotaTeq and RotaRix do not come with this additional risk. In response to vaccine safety concerns in 1986, Congress passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. It required many things of the CDC, including that all care providers report side effects after vaccination to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. This is jointly administered by the FDA and the CDC. So these two organizations get every possible side effect that could occur after vaccinations. They then analyze these side effects to see if they were a cause of the vaccine itself or something else, and if there is a pattern or if it was just a single incident of a specific side effect. The Vaccine Injury Compensation Program would then provide any person with vaccine compensation to those who experience certain health issues following vaccination. So if you are identified as having a negative side effect from a vaccine, you do get compensated. The FDA does not approve a vaccine unless initial trials indicate the benefits clearly outweigh the risks. Getting a vaccine licensed for human use is a rigorous process involving 3 phases of clinical trials and may take 10 or more years in order to finish. Vaccines are subject to particularly high safety standards, much more than other drugs, and that's because, unlike other health treatments, they're given to healthy people and not sick people in need of help. Childhood immunizations in the United States are routine immunizations against 14 different diseases, as listed here in this picture in your book. 2 additional vaccines are recommended for adolescents, and that's human papillomavirus, or HPV, as well as meningococcal disease. HPV, remember, is an STD, or sexually transmitted virus often, and meningococcal disease is found more frequently in people who live in close quarters, like college dorm rooms. That's why these vaccines are given to adolescents. There are even some vaccines that are provided on an adult schedule, which include some of the vaccinations for children, including booster shots, as well as some different vaccines specific to older individuals, such as the vaccine for shingles and pneumonia. However, almost 100,000 adults still die every year in the United States because of a lack of vaccine against vaccine-preventable diseases. Now let's take a look very briefly at a couple of other diseases that affect the immune system. The first of these is HIV. HIV infects helper T cells in particular, and as a result destroys the helper T cells, resulting in immunocompromised individuals. This results, when the helper T cells die, in that person with HIV, who will eventually develop AIDS without treatment, becoming so immunocompromised that one infection after another eventually will cause their death. Leukemia is another one of these clinical correlates. This is an all too familiar term, as it's a kind of cancer characterized by uncontrolled reproduction of white blood cells. There are different types that can occur in children, adolescents, or adults, but thankfully the types that occur in children often are fairly easy to treat. There's also the immunodeficiency that your book reviews a few times, called Severe Combined Immunodeficiency Disorder, or SID. This is a devastating disease acquired at birth, in which individuals lack functional B and T cells. In this case, they essentially lack any active immunity at all. Death is a certainty for these individuals, again resulting from repeated infections. In recent years, thankfully, gene therapy and early bone marrow transplants have proven effective in order to treat some of these cases. Well, that's it for Chapter 15. I hope you learned about the immune system, didn't get too overwhelmed by all of the complexities of it, and found out a little bit more about how your body fights off the various microbes we've spent this semester discussing.